The first time I noticed, it felt too small to matter. That's what scares me most now, how quietly it began. I was standing in my parents' living room, half listening to my mother talk about something unimportant, when my eyes landed on an old framed photo sitting on the shelf. It was from a summer barbecue years ago. I remembered that day clearly. The heat, the cheap paper plates bending under food, the way my uncle spilled a drink and everyone laughed. I remembered exactly where I'd been standing when the picture was taken. But I wasn't there. At first, my brain tried to protect me. Maybe it was a different angle. Maybe I'd stepped away. Maybe it was just another photo from that day, not the one I remembered. I leaned closer, scanning faces, counting people. Everyone was there. My parents, my siblings, cousins. Even people who barely showed up to family events made the cut. Just not me. I laughed it off inside my head. That's what you do when something feels wrong but not dangerous yet. You assume the simplest explanation because the alternative feels ridiculous. Why would your own family erase you from a photo? I didn't say anything. I didn't want to sound dramatic. I didn't want to be that person who reads too much into nothing. But the feeling stayed. A few weeks later, I was scrolling through my sister's social media late at night, the kind of mindless scrolling you do when you can't sleep. She'd posted an album titled Family Through the Years, dozens of photos, birthdays, holidays, vacations. I smiled at first, recognizing moments I thought belonged to all of us. Then my stomach dropped. I kept scrolling. One photo might have been coincidence. Two could still be explained away. But 10? 20? Years of memories where I knew I'd been present, sometimes front and center, and yet somehow I was gone. Cropped out. Replaced by awkward spacing. Framed so tightly it looked intentional. I zoomed in on one picture from a graduation party. I remembered standing right next to my brother, my arm around him, smiling so hard my face hurt. In the posted version, there was a strange gap beside him, like the photo had been stitched together poorly. The background warped slightly, like someone had erased something that used to be there. Like me, my chest started to ache, not sharply, but deeply, like pressure building under my ribs. I felt stupid even thinking it. Families don't do that. They don't collectively decide to remove someone from history. That only happens in movies or stories online you don't really believe. Still, I kept looking. Every album told the same story. Every milestone moved forward without me. It wasn't just recent photos either. Older ones too. Childhood pictures I distinctly remembered being in. Group shots where I'd worn the same outfit my memory still clung to. I checked tags. Nothing. I checked comments. People saying things like, beautiful family, and so complete. I stared at those words longer than I should have. Complete. The word echoed in my head in a way that made my throat tighten. By the time I put my phone down, my hands were shaking. The pain still wasn't loud. It was worse than that. It was quiet and invasive, slipping into every thought. I started questioning myself. Maybe my memory was wrong. Maybe I was confusing events. Maybe I'd exaggerated my place in these moments because I wanted to belong more than I actually did. That thought hurt more than anything else. The final confirmation came at a family gathering. Someone had put together a slideshow. Old photos rotating on the TV while everyone chatted and laughed. I stood at the back of the room, watching years of my life pass by without me. Holidays where I remembered setting the table. Trips where I remembered sharing hotel rooms. Celebrations where I remembered holding the camera and also stepping into frame. I felt invisible in real time. No one noticed my silence. No one noticed the way I stopped smiling. They laughed at memories that no longer included me, reminisced about moments I apparently hadn't lived. That was when I knew it wasn't accidental. Accidents don't repeat themselves with this kind of consistency. Mistakes don't erase someone from every angle of their own life. Someone had made a decision. Later that evening, I decided to test something. I didn't confront anyone dramatically. I didn't accuse. I kept my voice light, casual, like I was talking about the weather. I pointed to a photo on the wall and said something simple. something harmless. I said, "That's funny. I thought I was in that picture." The room didn't freeze. That's what chilled me. My sibling answered immediately, without hesitation, without even looking at the photo. They said, "No, you weren't." The words came out too smooth, too fast. I laughed nervously and said I could have sworn I was. They shrugged and said, "You're probably thinking of a different one." Then they changed the subject. No confusion, no curiosity. No. Oh, really? No, let's check. Just dismissal. Rehearsed dismissal. I stood there, nodding along, pretending it didn't feel like the floor had shifted beneath me. Pretending my reality hadn't just been overwritten in a single sentence. Pretending I hadn't just realized something terrifying. They weren't surprised. They weren't unsure. They weren't wondering if they'd made a mistake. They already knew the answer. That night, lying in bed, I replayed every moment over and over again. The photos, the gaps, the way no one questioned my absence, the way the denial came so easily. I wasn't missing by accident. I was missing by agreement. And the worst part wasn't knowing they'd erased me. It was knowing they'd practiced pretending they hadn't. Once I noticed the pattern, I couldn't unsee it. Every photo felt like a question mark. Every family memory felt unstable, like it could be rewritten the moment I turned my back. I didn't want to believe my family was capable of something this calculated, so I did what anyone desperate for reassurance would do. I started asking questions, not accusations, not confrontations, just small, careful probes, like I was testing thin ice. I asked my sister first, casually, while we were alone in the kitchen. I mentioned the old graduation photo again and said I could have sworn I'd been standing next to her. She didn't even look up from her phone when she answered. "You're overthinking it." The phrase hit me harder than I expected. Not because it was cruel, but because it was final. There was no curiosity in her voice, no room for discussion, just a full stop placed at the end of my memory. I asked my mother a few days later. I chose a different photo, one from a holiday years ago. I told her I remembered wearing a red sweater that day. I remembered how itchy it was, how I'd complained about it all evening. She smiled at me the way you smile at someone who's confused and said, "You weren't there that year." I felt my stomach twist. I knew I was there. I remembered arriving late. I remembered the snow. I remembered taking pictures for everyone else because my phone had the best camera back then. I remembered stepping into frame for at least one shot. But she said it so confidently, so gently, like she was correcting a child who'd mixed up dates. I asked my brother next. Different event, different year, same answer. It's just the angle. The words were always different, but the meaning was the same. Nothing to see here, nothing to question, nothing worth trusting in my own mind. What terrified me wasn't the denial, it was the consistency. They never contradicted each other. Not once. No one said, "I don't remember." No one said, "Maybe." No one said, "Let's look." It was like they'd all memorized their lines. Like there was a script they were following to keep the story intact. And slowly, painfully, it worked. I started doubting myself. I replayed memories until they felt warped. I wondered if I'd imagined moments that never happened. I questioned whether my need to belong had filled in gaps that weren't real. I found myself apologizing mid-sentence for even bringing it up, afraid I sounded unstable. That's how gaslighting really works. Not by screaming lies at you, but by calmly insisting your truth is inconvenient. One night, I stood in my closet holding a dress I was certain I'd worn in one of the missing photos. I remembered exactly how it fit. I remembered someone complimenting it. I remembered posing awkwardly because I didn't know what to do with my hands. I sat on the floor and cried. Not because of the dress, but because I couldn't prove any of it. My memories had turned into a crime scene with no evidence. And I was the only suspect. I stopped asking for a while. Not because I believed them, but because I felt myself shrinking. Every denial chipped away at my confidence until I wasn't sure how to argue for my own existence anymore. Family dinners became exhausting. Every framed photo on the wall felt like a silent accusation. You don't belong here. Then one afternoon, while cleaning out a drawer, I found something I'd forgotten about. An old external hard drive. It was scratched, dusty, shoved beneath cables and receipts from another life. I stared at it for a long time before plugging it in, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Maybe nothing. Maybe proof that I wasn't losing my mind. The drive whirred to life slowly, like it was waking up after years of neglect. Folder after folder appeared. Old backups, random files, and then a folder labeled with a year that made my hands shake. I opened it. There I was. Not in one photo, in many. I checked cloud backups next. Accounts I hadn't logged into in years. Password resets. Old emails. My hope rose and fell with every login attempt. The folders were empty. Files deleted. Backups overwritten. It was like someone had gone through and selectively wiped the evidence, leaving just enough behind to confuse me, but not enough to fully restore what had been taken. My hands started shaking again, this time not from doubt, but from fear. This wasn't just denial anymore. This was cleanup. Someone had known where to look. Someone had taken the time to erase originals, to control the narrative down to the data itself. That realization made my skin crawl. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a family forgetting. This was intention. I sat there in the dim light of my room, staring at my own face on the screen, knowing I'd just crossed a line. I'd found proof they didn't want me to have. Proof that made their calm dismissals feel sinister in hindsight. They hadn't just agreed on a lie. They'd worked to protect it. And I had no idea yet what they were so desperate to hide. The moment I realized the erasing wasn't private anymore was the moment the shame truly set in. It's one thing to be removed quietly, behind closed doors, in albums only family sees. It's another thing entirely to watch your absence be performed publicly, over and over again, while everyone pretends it's normal. It started with birthdays. Photos posted online with captions about love and togetherness. Candles blown out. Smiling faces. Comments flooding in. I recognized the rooms, the decorations, the dates. I remembered being there. I remembered wrapping gifts, helping clean up, standing just out of frame while someone counted down to take the picture. But online, I was nowhere. Not tagged. Not mentioned. Not questioned. People commented things like beautiful family and you're all so lucky to have each other, and no one paused to ask why one person was missing. I hovered over the comments, half expecting someone to notice, someone to say my name. They never did. Then came graduations, caps and gowns, proud smiles, carefully staged photos posted with long captions about growth and support. I remembered sitting in uncomfortable chairs, clapping until my hands hurt, holding bags and jackets while everyone else posed. I remembered standing off to the side, waiting for my turn to be included. There was no turn. Holiday cards were worse. Those hurt in a quiet, humiliating way. Cards mailed out to friends, coworkers, distant relatives, a smiling group photo on the front, matching outfits, coordinated colors. I saw one at a neighbor's house before it ever reached my mailbox. I stood there staring at it while they talked about how nice it was to see such a close family. "You're lucky," they said to me. "Your family is so close." I smiled and nodded while something inside me collapsed. I started noticing how careful I became online. How I avoided liking posts that erased me. How I stopped commenting altogether because I didn't know how to exist in a space where I wasn't acknowledged. Every public photo felt like a confirmation of what I already feared. I wasn't just being forgotten. I was being edited out in front of an audience. The humiliation peaked at a major family event. A wedding. I showed up dressed carefully, nervous in a way I couldn't explain. I kept wondering if I was imagining things, if maybe tonight would be different. Weddings are about family, about inclusion, about history. I told myself no one would dare erase me here. I was wrong. During the reception, someone called for a group photo. Family only. Everyone gathered quickly, laughing, squeezing together. I stepped forward automatically, muscle memory guiding me into a space I thought still belonged to me. A hand touched my arm. Light. Firm. Someone said, "Can you step out for a second? Just for this one." I froze. I looked around, waiting for someone to say something. To laugh it off. To make room for me instead. No one did. No one met my eyes. I stepped back, my face burning, my chest tight. They took the photo without me. I stood there, holding my drink, pretending I needed to check my phone. Pretending my absence was my choice. I told myself it was just one picture, just one moment. But my body knew better. Later that night, I searched for the photo online. It was already posted. Cropped. Centered. Perfect. No awkward space. No trace that I'd ever stepped forward. No sign I'd been asked to leave. The comments poured in immediately. Gorgeous family. Everyone looks amazing. What a beautiful group. I stared at the image until my vision blurred. This wasn't subtle anymore. This wasn't denial or forgetting or angles. This was choreography. This was someone guiding me out of the frame and then smoothing over the evidence like I'd never been there at all. The worst part wasn't the exclusion. It was the performance. The way they smiled. The way they celebrated. The way they accepted praise for unity while actively cutting me out. I realized then that my silence was part of the illusion. As long as I didn't object, the story held. But I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Because being erased privately is pain. Being erased publicly is humiliation. And someone, somewhere, was watching all of it unfold. Someone who remembered me being there. Someone who hadn't forgotten. Someone who was about to reach out. And when they did, everything my family worked so hard to hide would finally surface. The message came on an ordinary afternoon, which somehow made it worse. Nothing dramatic. No warning. Just a notification from an account I didn't recognize, with no profile photo and a username that meant nothing to me. For a second, I almost ignored it. I was tired of surprises. Tired of hoping. Then I read the first line. They didn't ask who I was. They used my name. Seeing it written by a stranger made my stomach drop in a way I can't fully explain. It felt invasive, like someone had stepped into my house without knocking. My fingers hovered over the screen, unsure whether to respond or block them immediately. My instinct told me this was dangerous. My intuition told me it was important. The message was short, calm, direct. They said they had something that belonged to me. I reread that sentence over and over, my pulse loud in my ears. I didn't answer right away. I stared at the screen, thinking of every possibility. Scam. Mistake. Cruel joke. Someone trying to stir drama, but none of those explanations explained how they knew my name or why their timing felt so precise. When I finally responded, all I typed was a question mark. They replied instantly. They said they had the original photos. The ones before I was cropped. Before I was removed. Before the story changed. They said they had the timeline too. When edits were made. When files disappeared. When albums were altered. My hands started shaking. They told me my family wasn't just hiding me. They were hiding why. That word stayed with me. Why? Not how. Not when. Why? I felt like I was standing on the edge of something enormous, something that could either explain everything or break me completely. I asked them how they knew any of this. Their response came slower this time, like they were choosing their words carefully. They said they used to be close to my family, close enough to see things I wasn't meant to see, close enough to recognize patterns, close enough to notice when someone stopped appearing. I didn't trust them yet. I couldn't. But I couldn't look away either. I asked for proof. They didn't argue. They didn't reassure me. They didn't oversell it. They just sent another message saying they understood if I didn't believe them. Then they said they'd send one thing, just enough to show they weren't lying. A moment later, an image appeared. It was blurred, intentionally. The edges were softened, details obscured. But in the center, circled in red, was a familiar shape. A face. My face. Standing exactly where I remembered standing in a photo I'd been told I wasn't in. I couldn't breathe. Even blurred, I recognized the moment. The background, the people beside me, the angle. It matched one of the memories I'd been dismissed for bringing up, one of the photos that had made me question my sanity. I stared at it until my eyes burned. Before I could respond, another message came through. The stranger mentioned a detail no one outside my family should have known. Something small. Something insignificant to anyone else. A nickname I'd been called only during that period of my life. A comment someone had made right before that photo was taken. A moment I'd never shared publicly. That's when fear turned into certainty. They hadn't guessed. They hadn't assumed. They had been there. My chest tightened as the reality settled in. This person hadn't found me randomly. They hadn't stumbled across this by accident. They had watched the erasing happen. They had seen the before and after. They had seen me disappear in real time. I asked them why they were reaching out now. Their reply was the longest message yet. They said they'd stayed quiet for a long time because they didn't know if it was their place. Because families are complicated. Because they assumed someone would tell me eventually. But the longer it went on, the worse it felt. They said watching me be erased publicly, repeatedly, without protest, started to feel like participating in something cruel. They said the wedding photo was the last straw. They told me they saw the original version first. They saw me standing there. Then, later, they saw the posted one. And something about how clean the edit was made them sick. They said I deserved to know. I sat there in silence long after the messages stopped coming. My phone felt heavy in my hands, like it carried the weight of every lie I'd been fed. I thought about my family's rehearsed answers, their calm dismissals, their confidence. I thought about how carefully this must have been done. And for the first time, I understood something that terrified me. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. The stranger told me they had everything saved. Originals, backups, dates, versions, conversations. They said if I wanted them, they'd send them. If I didn't, they'd respect that too. I stared at the last message for a long time. Because once I saw everything, there would be no pretending anymore. No doubt. No going back. And I knew, deep down, that whatever my family was hiding had nothing to do with photos. And everything to do with me. I told the stranger I was ready. There was no dramatic pause on their end. No warning. Just a steady stream of files that began filling my screen one after another, each one landing heavier than the last. Originals, high-resolution photos I'd never been allowed to see again. Images untouched by cropping or clever framing. There I was, unmistakably present, standing shoulder to shoulder with the same people who had calmly told me I wasn't there. Then came the metadata. Dates. Times. Edit histories. I watched the timeline unfold like a confession written in numbers. Photos taken, uploaded, then altered days or weeks later. Versions saved under new names. Originals moved, then deleted. Some files had been accessed repeatedly by the same account, always right before public posts went up. This wasn't accidental. It wasn't sloppy. It was methodical. The stranger sent backups next. Cloud archives I didn't have access to. Old devices synced before permissions changed. Copies preserved because someone, somewhere, hadn't felt right about erasing a person completely. And then came the message that made my hands go cold. A screenshot. A family group chat. My name sat in the middle of the screen, surrounded by messages that stripped away every last excuse I'd been offered. There was no confusion. No concern for my feelings. Just logistics. Discussions about consistency. About making sure edits matched across platforms. About how important it was that everyone stick to the same story. One message stood out more than the rest. Someone said it was safer this way. That word cracked something open inside me. Safer. As I read further, the motive finally surfaced, ugly and undeniable. It wasn't just one reason. It never is. It was reputation, tangled with money. Inheritance conversations threaded through concern about appearances. Fear that my presence complicated a narrative they'd been presenting for years. Fear that questions would be asked if I remained visible. I wasn't erased because I was unwanted. I was erased because I was inconvenient. One family member led it. I could see it clearly now. Their messages were decisive, authoritative, followed by compliance from others. Some hesitated. Some asked questions. Most went quiet. Silence, I realized, had been their survival tactic. It was easier to let one person take control than to risk becoming the next problem to be removed. I didn't cry when I finished reading. I felt something steadier than that. Clarity. I didn't storm into anyone's house. I didn't post screenshots online immediately. I didn't confront them with rage. I asked for a family meeting. They agreed too quickly. We sat around the same table I'd grown up at, the same one where photos had been taken, edited, and rewritten. I didn't accuse. I didn't argue. I placed my phone on the table and slid it forward. I asked one question. How long were you going to keep pretending I wasn't there? The reactions told me everything. The one who led it went defensive immediately. Denial layered over justification. Claims that it was complicated. That it wasn't meant to hurt me. That I was misunderstanding their intentions. Others couldn't meet my eyes. One person cried. Quietly. Not for me, but for themselves. For being caught. I didn't need them to admit it. I had the truth in my hands. Proof they couldn't talk their way around. The calm certainty in my voice scared them more than yelling ever could have. I told them I knew why it happened. I told them I knew who started it. I told them I knew who stayed silent. No one interrupted me. That's when I understood something important. They hadn't erased me because I was powerless. They erased me because they thought I wouldn't fight back. I didn't threaten them. I didn't tell them what I was going to do next. I just told them one thing. They didn't get to decide whether I existed. What I did with the proof was my choice. I could expose everything. Publicly. Completely. Let the same audience that praised their perfect family see the cost of that illusion. I had enough evidence to make sure the story could never be rewritten again. Or I could walk away. Not quietly. Not erased. But whole. With my identity intact and the truth preserved somewhere, it could never be destroyed again. In the end, I chose myself. I backed up everything. Multiple places. Multiple people. The truth no longer lived in just one device, one account, one pair of hands. It was safe. So was I. I stopped attending events where I had to pretend. I stopped chasing acknowledgement from people who only valued control. I stopped shrinking to fit a version of the family that never protected me. My absence became intentional this time. The stranger sent one final message weeks later. They said they hadn't helped me purely out of kindness. They said they were connected to the secret in a way that made staying silent impossible. That helping me was also a way of telling their own truth. I didn't ask for more details. I didn't need them. Because the most powerful thing I reclaimed wasn't the photos. It was my place in my own story. And no one will ever erase that again.